Good morning to you all. Welcome to Beyond Bitcoin. And this time I'm solo. My partner and my friend Derek is traveling and he could not be here. I'm sure he's going to have a lot of FOMO because the conversation we're going to have here today is going to be super interesting. And I've been focused on this part of the business for a long time. So without any further ado, let me introduce a friend, a colleague, a pioneer in institutional crypto, Simon Barnaby, who is CMO at Archax. He's an internationally experienced executive, having worked for both entrepreneurial startups as well as the US and UK headquartered global corporations. Simon is now CMO at Archax. Archax is first looked deeper into when I was at State Street. It's the first registered crypto exchange in the UK, based in London, built by the capital market veterans, a comprehensive digital asset ecosystem where you can trade, hold, and stake your cryptocurrencies all in one place. So really a one-stop shop. So Simon, welcome to Beyond Bitcoin. Such a pleasure to have you. I know we've had endless conversations and conferences in Hilton lobbies, at Consensus, and on Zoom calls. It's a pleasure to have you and welcome aboard.
Great. No, thanks for inviting me along, Nitin. Great pleasure to see you and speak to you as always. And pleased we're having a kind of a formal catch up today, which is nice.
Yeah, let's keep it informal because that's where the fun is.
Yeah.
So tell us your journey, Simon, only because I think we've had this ton of conversation, both from a crypto angle, but also from an institutional angle. My job at State Street when we first intersected and what you were trying to do in terms of expanding, having this global expansion of Archax. Tell us your journey. How'd you get into this mess?
Sure. Yeah. How did I get into this mess? Well, I guess looking at my journey first, maybe, and then talk a little bit about the Archax journey. So my journey, worked in capital markets pretty much all my career. Worked for a lot of sort of technology providers to financial institutions around the world. Spent a long time at Fidessa, the big trading platform provider, and left there in 2017. Doing consulting work with fintech firms in London, whilst working out what I might like to do next. And some of those projects that I worked on were blockchain related. Got some exposure to that. Got interested in crypto, and then was introduced to the founders of Archax, three guys working together at a hedge fund. And really, the journey of Archax came about because there was a belief that the innovation of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and others was really exciting, but the underlying technology, blockchain, DLT technology, concepts like tokenization had a real potential to disrupt and revolutionize traditional financial markets. And if that's going to be the case, then someone needs to build that institutional grade, regulated product, services, infrastructure that are needed to act as a bit of a bridge between the innovative crypto world and the more traditional regulated financial market space. And so that's really what Archax is all about. Like you said in the intro, we're an ecosystem for digital assets. So we do everything from the tokenization, the custody, the fundraising, trading. We can do it across the board really for cryptocurrencies, but also for regulated digital assets like tokenized equity, tokenized debt, tokenized funds, and the like. But yeah, that's got me on the journey. That's where Archax is. And I know we've had many conversations in your State Street days about that real world asset tokenization space, which seems to be the buzzword at the moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think the space you're in, Simon, especially your vision of how you described Archax, it's a hard business given the regulatory landscape around the world, especially in the United States where I live, and we both have butted heads with our own colleagues on this topic, but also with the regulators in terms of educating them and helping them understand. We've made some progress, but given the uncertain landscape, and it's inching towards now political realm, where crypto is now seeping into deciding elections and the super PACs, which is the political action committees, it's truly a mess. It shouldn't be this case because technology should be agnostic to any of these agendas that we have seen lately. How do you see, and you as a CMO, Simon, how do you see navigating that? Because you're a global firm, crypto is global, you're dealing with global infrastructures. Some of the asset classes are truly global in nature. We have discussed the status of Bitcoin and Ether, for example, on this podcast itself as having a nation state status, that they're truly global currencies, they're global networks, you have global participants, and you have the same rules of engagement no matter where you engage from. So how do you differentiate yourself and navigate that landscape of clarifying, having regulatory clarity and able or unable to do business in certain jurisdictions?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a complicated answer, as you probably expect. Funny enough, I'm sitting in a hotel room in Zurich right now, and I'm here at the Point Zero Forum.
Point Zero Forum, yeah.
which is a very regulation-focused event. So there's regulators and companies from all around the world focused on that very subject. How should things be regulated? How can things be done better? And so it's an interesting conference. But coming back to the question, I think firstly, different regulators in different jurisdictions are at different stages of their journey in terms of regulating digital assets and cryptocurrencies. In the UK, the FCA has a pretty clear stance laid out for crypto regulation. I wouldn't say it's perfect, it's good, it's promoting things. There are still things that need to be sorted out. In Europe, we have MiCA coming into force, so clarity around crypto and digital asset regulation there. The US is complicated, clearly, because there's a lack of clarity there, maybe around exactly what crypto assets are defined as. Are they securities? Are they not? And how are they regulated? So complex there. But and as you mentioned, we're based in the UK. We are regulated in the UK, but very much a global firm. And so the way we're approaching regulation is we're getting additional permissions in additional jurisdictions. For example, we're getting licensed in the Netherlands, which will be through in the next month or so. That gives us the EU again. Post-Brexit, we're able to market our services and onboard clients with ease across the EU. We're also setting up in Dubai with an innovation license in DIFC, and we've been out talking to the regulators in Singapore and Hong Kong and Seoul and South Korea. We see that Southeast Asian corridor as an interesting marketplace to expand into too. The challenge, though, is that different regulators are at different stages of regulation, and some of them are doing it different to others. A pretty good example is in the UK, the FCA, a tier 1 regulator. Crypto spot is unregulated, crypto derivatives are regulated. In Singapore, MAS, another tier 1 regulator, it's the opposite way around. You have complications. And I think what we need in globally is clarity. Some regions are clearer than others at the moment, but global clarity around regulation for crypto and digital assets is important, but also consistency, and we need that too. For our own activities, we maintain a complicated matrix around, depending on the type of user you are, the type of product you want, and the jurisdiction you're based in. That matrix tells us whether we're allowed to onboard you, whether we're allowed to sell you this or that. It is super complicated because it literally is country by country, regulator by regulator. But we use that, so we can onboard clients from many parts of the world. There are some parts where we can't, and sometimes it's different people from different regions we can, based on whether they're retail or not retail, the product that we're offering and everything else. So it's a complicated matrix that we navigate at the moment. We are addressing it ourselves by expanding our regulatory reach around the world, so we're getting regulated in more and more places. But it's difficult for the institutions getting involved. They really want some clear and consistent regulation, and that's the push to try and get that at the moment.
Yeah, no, certainly commendable, and I'm appalled with the changes happening in the world, and also commend the ability for you to keep your sanity, Simon, because I had so much challenges when I was at State Street in terms of both, and it's no fault of financial institutions or service providers like yourself. It's just the fact that there's so much interpretation because the US regulation is principles-based as opposed to what's happening in Europe and in Singapore, as you cited, that it's much more defined as opposed to US. It's left to interpretation, which leads to all kinds of challenges. So let me ask you the question, which I was really keen to ask you on this podcast, because when I was at State Street, Simon, Archax, to me, comprehensive digital asset ecosystem, you're dealing with crypto and dealing with digital assets versus tokenized RWAs as they've come to prominence. When I was at State Street, we were looking into building the infrastructure and having a lens where we treat crypto, a fifth asset class, with a different lens, and then you would treat the tokenized RWA with a different lens, which would feed into the existing system, whether it's fund accounting administration or whether it's transfer agency, and the entire gamut of how funds are distributed. And tokenization provided transactional efficiency, and which was natural for crypto itself. And the challenge that I had in that framing, Simon, was around the fact, what do I do with infrastructure, right? In the sense that I need to have a separate swim lane, and technically the infrastructure would be the same because you still need this custody solution, and we were the largest custodian at the time. You still needed the rails to be able to move the asset. You need to have some level of interoperability to connect with ATSs and the likes of different venues. How do you deal with it? Only because you're a service provider now, you're addressing this complicated industry and simplifying it for your clients, which I appreciated as a client of yours, Simon, at the time. But it's a hard challenge to solve. How are you looking at that? How's Archax looking at that?
Yeah, I guess, what we try and present to our clients, to our users, is we try and insulate them from all the nightmare that's going on underneath,
Yeah.
and maybe that mess you referred to earlier. We try and insulate them from that, so their user experience is as seamless and unified as it can be, regardless of what particular asset they may be trading. But what's going on underneath is more complicated. Looking at regulation in the UK, maybe to give a bit more context, here in the UK, cryptocurrencies are very clearly identified as a type of crypto asset, like a utility token, that is unregulated. So cryptocurrencies are one type of digital asset, if you like. Tokenized real world assets are classed as securities, effectively, or some kind of regulated instrument, depending on what that underlying real world asset may be. But in essence, they're treated like a security. Under the hood within Archax, we have sort of one swimming lane, as you put it, which is all about crypto and handling cryptocurrencies which are unregulated, and we have another which is all built around handling regulated digital assets and what is required for them. And then we try and present it all in a unified way to the users, the end users of our system. But it is complicated, and again, one of the challenges in the UK, for example, is even though, say we were to tokenize equity in Archax and make those tokenized equities available, a broker in the UK who is already regulated by the FCA to handle equities on the London Stock Exchange, they're not allowed to handle those tokenized equities unless they get on the crypto asset register, which is a anti-money laundering directive that they have to get onto, which feels like an unnecessary hurdle. At the end of the day, it's still a security. It's just different technology underneath. It's still a security. They're already regulated for securities. They've got anti-money laundering regulations up to their eyes, but they have to get another piece of regulatory approval before they can handle the digital version of it. It's a good example. So we then have to navigate that. So it's complex. Sometimes it's unnecessary complexity. But you're right. The underlying technology is fragmented in a way because it has to handle all these different things. But at the front, we try and unify it as best we can.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant, and it's a hard task for sure. And I think I've seen that too, that you have all these, like we had the SAB 121, which is still vetoed by President Biden, as you may have heard. And the question that I would have for regulators is that the interpretation of SAB 121 for all tokenized assets, and I understand the technical risks and the permanent loss of asset risk with Bitcoin. So I wouldn't say it made sense, but the intention was for Bitcoin. But that rule expanded, which is ability for any custodian to be able to have the value of the asset on its balance sheet, which is completely capital inefficient to hold that kind of money in your balance sheet just in the event. But I never understood why they would have the same regulation for tokenized RWAs, the real world assets, whether it's bond securities, because you have the same sort of market infrastructure, the micro market structures that provides for these securities to be traded. I never understood as to why, and I would always get in this argument as to why are we doing this? What is the rationale behind the fact that we have enough risk models and risk measures to mitigate these risks, whether it's loss of assets or whether it's bankruptcy remote elements of the custodians that bring some level of stability to the financial markets. So what's interesting, Archax, for you, Simon, is for Archax, how do you differentiate yourself for the likes of Coinbase? Because if you look at Coinbase, it's a vertically integrated capital market infrastructure. They have exchanges, they have custody, they have prime brokerage, now they have Coinbase Asset Management, which is a separate business unit, I think, between Coinbase. And many of the exchanges like Kraken and, of course, Binance are replicating that model because it gives them an immense sort of flexibility, largely for crypto assets, which is the Bitcoin, the Ether, and many of the ERC20 tokens. So how does Archax differentiate itself from the other digital asset exchange in the market?
Yeah, I guess the first thing is we're not trying to be another Coinbase or another Kraken or another Binance particularly. That's not our aim, and we're not really focused on retail. Retail is not a target for us. Our aim is to leverage what's being built on blockchain technology, tokenization for real world assets, and build products and services for the institutional space. So on the one hand, we do have a crypto exchange, a crypto market. We do have a crypto OTC desk, which you could say competes with some of those guys, and it does. But again, our focus is really in delivering a solution that's targeted at institutions, that kind of built with them in mind. It has all the controls and processes that an institution expects. So it looks like a familiar traditional exchange and an OTC desk, but it happens to be handling crypto. And the fact that we're fully regulated by the FCA, an exchange, a broker custodian, that gives some people some comfort. So even though crypto may be unregulated, the fact that we're a regulated entity and we operate in a regulated way, even if the asset class is unregulated itself, we treat it as if it was regulated, that gives some comfort. So that's the differentiator, if you like. But then the real differentiator is, and this is where our long-term push is, replicating digital representations of traditional assets, so real-world assets, tokenized equity, tokenized debt, real estate, funds, property, music royalties, film rights, whatever it may be, is that all those things are regulated assets. All those things require regulation, and that's the thing we have that many of the other existing crypto markets don't, because they're operating in an unregulated space.
Got it. So in that case, and you're right, I think most of the exchanges are largely on retail. They all aspire to get into institutions, which you, of course, have pioneered. What is the typical value proposition that Archax would provide to its customers? And I know this because we've discussed this in State Street's context, and also your US tour that you did during Consensus, and prior to that for the RWA summit that we met at. What is your typical selling point to the institutions like custodians and like broker dealers and like large investment managers? How do you approach them? Of course, one thing is you're providing, at least from my vantage point, Simon, is that besides the basics of trading and custody, you're providing some of the nuances of crypto sort of world, which is staking and getting into access to DeFi. Tell us a bit more about that thinking.
Yeah, yes, we do all those things. That is true, and we do them all in an institutional way. So that's one thing we offer. I think the key thing we offer, though, is more like partnerships. Aberdeen Asset Management, for example, they are a firm that we had been working with for some time. They were very interested in tokenizing funds. They could see that the world was moving in a natively digital way, and that in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, whatever it is, the future of funds were going to be tokenized on-chain versions of funds. And they knew they had to get on that journey. They weren't sure which way the journey was going to take, which directions they were going to have to go in to get to that endpoint. But they wanted to work with a credible team of people who understood their world, which is what the Archax team is. Yeah. They wanted to work with an entity that was fully regulated and approached everything in an institutional way, which we are too. So I think they ended up investing in us as well. But that's a true partnership, and we've been tokenizing Aberdeen's funds, and we're actually working in similar ways with a number of other asset managers and investment banks. I can mention BlackRock, because we've recently put out a press release about that, providing tokenized versions of their money market funds, and we're working with a whole host of others. And then once you have something like a tokenized money market fund, suddenly you have this token that you can do something with. So we're now working with several banks where they're using a tokenized money market fund. They're using that token as collateral, posting overnight margin payments, making interbank payments to clients. Suddenly, rather than moving in and out of the fiat banking system with all the costs and delays that results, finally you have a natively digital token, a yield-bearing money market fund instrument, regulated instrument that you can use for payments and collateral. And ultimately, you can maybe go and borrow against it or lend it in the DeFi world, which is where we will be going next. But I think, coming back to the question, what do we offer our clients? We offer that kind of partnership. We understand their world, we understand the new world, we're regulated, we have all the pieces of the puzzle, if you like, and then we partner with them to help them on their journey to work out how tokenization, DLT, blockchain can benefit them in a true form of partnership.
Bravo, Simon, because I've talked about collateral management, which is what you mentioned briefly, that you could post your token as collateral. And I always felt that crypto is missing that piece. I also thought the tokenized assets, the RWA, the real world asset piece, is missing that piece. How do you build the collateral management apparatus that we would maintain at State Street or BNY or JP Morgan? So if you're going down that path, which I think is bravo, because I think that is a missing piece which sort of funds the entire capital markets behind the scenes, that you're looking at this overnight lending and borrowing that actually happens. And I use the word financial primitives. Now you're at 0.0 Forum, Simon, and I have a massive FOMO at the moment because I really wanted to be there, but I could not because I just came from a week-long sort of technical summit that I did with my team and some of the investors. But tell us what's going on. What's the normal, if you were to provide a summary of the energy at 0.0 Forum, what's going on? Give us the up-to-date element.
We're halfway through day one, so it's early days for the conference, but it's been as busy as ever. I would say it's busier than last year. For those that don't know what Point Zero Forum is, it's a joint initiative with the MAS, the Singapore regulator, and the Swiss regulators here, and they put together this forum, this conference every year for 2 days in Zurich, and it's very much focused along regulation, compliance. It's all that side of things for digital assets in their broadest sense. It's very focused on those areas, but it attracts a super senior delegate audience from across the world. So it's a great place to come and network and meet people and have discussions at a very senior level. I've just come from a large panel. There were 20 people. It's a big round table panel, if you like. It went on for an hour and a half, all around permissionless blockchains. And there were people from the industry. There were people from the investment banks and asset managers talking about the challenges of permissionless blockchains. And there were people from the crypto world building these things and to counter those. So it was a really interesting discussion. But I think the real buzz here is around tokenization of real world assets. It's the buzz everywhere. It's the realization that crypto was great, but actually what's coming next is even more exciting because institutions can get more and more involved and leverage the benefits of it. And then there's also a touch of AI and a touch of quantum computing. So it's touching into those areas too. They're seen as potential innovation technologies or techniques for financial markets as well. So there are some focus on those things, but a lot of it is around asset tokenization.
Oh my God, Simon! Now I have massive FOMO because when I was at IBM, I used to write a lot about intersection. I use the word nexus of technologies as to how that's going to change the financial markets. So now I have more FOMO, though I've been having this massive scroll of everybody posting their Point Zero Forum experiences. So hopefully next year I get to make it. I know this is super interesting, Simon. We can go for hours, but we have to wrap. And I do have one last question for you. Is what exciting projects or developments can we expect from Archax in the near future?
Yeah, well, we've got a whole host of other asset managers, investment banks that we're working with, and we'll be able to announce those over the coming months. So I think that's really exciting because it really does show the scale of the blue chip entities that are really getting involved in this space. So I think that will be really exciting. I think the other thing is we're looking at DeFi and seeing what's being pioneered in that space and seeing how us with our regulatory umbrella can leverage what's happening in DeFi in a kind of a regulated institutional way. We've taken a fork of Uniswap technology and built a DEX which would have regulated instruments on and would and operate under that regulated umbrella. We think that is very exciting. We've also taken a fork of Aave and looking at how a sort of a digital securities lending borrowing market could work. So I think those are the next really exciting steps in our journey, is leveraging the cutting edge of technology in the DeFi space.
Wow, that's super exciting, especially when you start getting into intersection of DeFi and institutional. Simon, congratulations on your recent successes. Archax has been on my feet for quite some time. I've seen the work that you've done with BlackRock, of course, with Aberdeen, which has been historic, the partnership you've had. And thanks for your time and friendship. I've always enjoyed chatting with you in conferences, looking into what you all are building. And I think it's quite seismic and sizable initiative that you've taken. So enjoy your time at Point Zero. Thank you for taking out 25 minutes of your time and spending with us. And we'll chat soon, Simon. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Thanks, Nitin. Always good to speak to you. Hope to see you in person again soon. Cheers.
Likewise. Stay well. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed our weekly conversation. If you have any questions, comments, or suggested topics, please contact Nitin Gaur or myself on the emails displayed here or via our LinkedIn profiles. Feel free to subscribe and share with like-minded friends. Stay well, inquisitive, and engaged. See you next week.